Please note that the information on Retire Vivid referenced in this video is accurate as of October 4th, 2024. Changes to laws and regulations may make portions of this segment outdated and no longer relevant. Information presented is for educational purposes only and is not intended to provide investment, tax, or legal advice. Please see our full disclosure at the end of this video.
Welcome to Retire Vivid. I'm Karen McCarty. That's Tommy Breitbach. And today's episode is a pretty good one today. It's, can you afford to retire early? Now, I would like to retire early. The question is, can you?
I feel a lot of people share your sentiment there.
I mean, why not, right? But there's some things you got to think about when it comes to all the variables that come into retirement.
Right. I mean, you don't hope to retire, you plan to retire.
Right.
And if you're thinking about retiring early, you're just adding, potentially years onto your retirement.
You are.
If you're, instead of looking at 10, 15 years, are you looking at 20, 25, 30 years?
Right.
I mean, it involves a lot of planning, longevity. You got to evaluate your assets, how you invested, what's your income. I mean, a whole bunch of things.
Yeah. So for people listening, just don't go out there. Oh, boom! Some guy told me on TV to retire. Don't go do that. Okay. I mean, we got to look at health insurance. We got to look at the 401ks. You got to be careful of penalties. I mean, there's a lot of variables. And so let's dive into that. Let's first talk a little bit about the rule of 55. What does that mean for our viewers? Because, I mean, Tommy, if you take a look at where most people's wealth is, it's in their IRA 401ks, and it's also in their home, for example. But be careful. I mean, there are some things you need to be aware of when it comes to your employer-sponsored plan in terms of, okay, do I leave it in the plan? Do I roll it out? We have reasons for this.
Right. And, if we are talking about retirement, that's most likely not earned income at that point.
Sure.
So, if we're pre-Social Security age, prior to when or if you want to claim your pension, you are looking at most likely those, the IRA, the 401k, the investment assets as a bridge to get to later income sources.
Right.
And so the rule of 55 is a great benefit to access those retirement accounts prior to age 59 and a half without the 10% penalty.
Right.
So it's a 10% tax savings on the amount you take out of it. But there are, we got 5 things here that you need to be aware of prior to implementing something like that.
Right, because you mentioned it. I mean, because I think a lot of people are aware of the 59.5% penalty where, if you take money out, there's some provisions in there. I'm not going to get too deep into that, but where they hit you with a 10% penalty, plus we got to pay tax. Can't get out of taxes. But you're right, there are 5 things that I want our viewers to know. So let's talk about the first one. And the first one is for public safety employees. And so this is for firefighters, EMTs, police officers. I mean, folks that are in that type of work, I mean, their rules are a little bit different where they can when they turn age 50.
Right. So we're talking about rule of 55. They get rule of 50.
Right.
And it's accessing that 401k, or the employer-sponsored plan, whatever line of work you're in, 401k, 403b, TSP, prior to 59 and a half.
Right. I mean, it's also make sure that you double-check to ensure that your plan does meet those requirements as well, too. Again, today is just a broad stroke across the board. So, okay, so that's number one. So that's for public safety employees. But the big one right here, you can withdraw only from the plan specific to that employer-sponsored plan or that employer. Let's talk about that.
And it's for those who have retired from their most recent employer after the age of 55 can access that plan. Mm-hmm. So a job, 2 jobs ago, you still have an old 401k hanging out there. You can't access that one. You can only access the most recent employer that you retired from.
Right.
So if you are considering going that route, you still have old 401ks out there. Review your plan, see if you can maybe consolidate those into your current employer's plan where you can access them.
Now again, folks, we're talking about people that have left their money inside the plan because, a lot of times what people would do is they would roll over their 401k to a traditional IRA. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. I want to be very clear. We are talking about your money inside of that employer-sponsored plan right now.
Correct.
That's a big one. Okay, next, you must leave your job the calendar year that you turn 55 or later, period.
Right, and it's not, retiring at 53 and then start withdrawing at 56.
Right.
It is you retire after age 55, you can access the assets under the rule of 55.
Right. And again, we already hit on this one. I mean, we kind of jumped, but that's fine. But the balance must stay there. I mean, that's just huge. I mean, people need to be aware of this. Now, this is a big one too, because we work with some, like for example, some federal employees, and their rules are just different from the private sector. But sometimes people would take their 401k plan, just like I mentioned earlier, and they would roll that to a traditional IRA. If you do that, the rule of 55 no longer applies.
Yeah, it's very important, depending on whatever the reason, if you were kind of forced into early retirement or you chose to do it, and you want all assets away from your prior employer.
Right.
Make sure you review the rule of 55 if you need that prior to 59 and a half.
So folks, I hope you picked up something there. If you are considering retiring early, look at this rule of 55. I mean, this is something you got to be careful. I mean, because again, so many times what would happen is people would maybe roll their money out just because they read something or whatever. I hope it wasn't because of a financial advisor, especially if you need that money. We've seen it though. We've seen it. So again, it's just working with somebody that has walked this path before and they know what they're doing. I mean, that's something that I think the big takeaway when it comes to the rule of 55.
For those individuals who are sitting there and maybe have rolled to the IRA.
Let's talk about that next.
All hope is not lost, but it becomes
beware.
There's kind of one way to do it right and a lot of ways to do it wrong.
And
Far more restrictive.
And that is called a 72T.
Substantially equal periodic payments.
So describe that.
So that allows, if you have assets in the IRA, it allows you to access prior to 59 and a half without that 10% penalty, still taxable, but not the penalty. But there's a requirement to go for at least 5 years or 59 and a half, whichever is later. So an individual starting one at age 53 is going to go 6.5 years to 59 and a half. Somebody starting at 57, they're going to continue that for 5 years until they reach 62. And there's, it's kind of, you have 3 calculation options, but it's a specific calculation, typically a fixed amount, far more restrictive. But getting into it, if you're 3 years in, you take extra money out of that IRA that you weren't supposed to. It went beyond the amount you calculated for that 72T. You could go back and have that 10% penalty assessed on everything you've taken up to.
My goodness.
So
yeah.
There's, I said this, there's kind of one way to do it right, a lot of ways to do it wrong. Review the rule of 55 prior to accessing the 72.
You're not kidding. You're not kidding. I mean the if I can help it, I mean, to be honest with you, I try to stay away from that. I mean, but sometimes it is what it is. But you're exactly right. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get it wrong. Right. And so work with somebody that has done this before. So that way, because we don't want people getting hurt, right? I mean, that's why we're doing this show. I mean, we don't want people getting hurt. Our goal is to give them their options, right? I mean, that's what this show, it's an educational talk show. That way people know about the Rule 55 or, like what you just said, the 72T.
For, I mentioned earlier, but whatever reason you're into retiring early, if you were forced out and make a quick snap judgment, get your assets out of that, just be aware of the Rule of 55 before any quick decisions are made.
Well, that's pretty good. I mean, we could keep going on the Rule 55 and the 72T, but we got more. So make sure you stay with us. We're going to talk more about the money. We're going to talk about health insurance, the things you need to think about if you're considering retiring early, right after the break.
Do you have questions about your retirement plan, or do you want to know if you are on the right track? We are here to help. Simply go to retirevivid.com or call the number below to schedule a 15-minute retirement review. You can speak with us about taxes, Social Security, your 401k, or any quick retirement questions at no cost to you. We are here to make retirement vivid. Schedule your 15-minute retirement review today.
Welcome back. We're talking about, can you afford to retire early? We just talked about the rule of 55. That's for employer-sponsored plans. We also talked about the 72T. Beware of that. Tommy, let's talk about the money. Because if you think about it, when people retire early, or if they want to retire early, I mean, one of the number one fears of retirees is running out of money.
Right. And we've seen life expectancies increase. And so, normal retirement has its associated time frame. If we're talking about an early retirement, we're just putting more years, hopefully, on that planning process, the withdrawals, the growth, all those things. But just putting more time in there requires more planning.
It certainly does. So let's talk about two things. Let's talk about how money's potentially invested. But you just said something. Let's talk about withdrawals. So, maybe people hear about this, but we are big fans of it as well too. It's called the 4% withdrawal rule because again, when you're working, you're feeding those 401k plans, right? That's your job, and your money's job is to grow for you. So then then if you're going to retire, okay, so you're going, okay, whatever we're walking into retirement, this is it. This is it. So the 4% withdrawal rule, let's talk a little bit about that, and then we'll dive into maybe how investments can play a role as well too.
A number of studies out there say that if it's your account's invested, moderately, we'll say 60-40, kind of in that range, you get a historical rate of return on that. You can take 4% of your account and it'll last out 20, 25, 30 years.
Sure.
And so on $1 million, 4% rule, $40,000 a year, it's getting you, $3,300 a month.
Right.
But when we're looking at withdrawal rates, the withdrawal rate becomes a hurdle rate, so you're not depleting your account.
Right.
And the higher the withdrawal rate, the more impact it has, especially if the account is not performing or the market's down in a year, you're taking amount on top of that.
Right.
It just becomes harder to come back from that.
I think you're really looking at it from a different stance because everybody has a different risk tolerance out there. You got to be careful. And so if you have a high risk tolerance and when the market's doing well, you're happy. You're happy, but when the market tanks, you won't be happy, and that may change your withdrawal rate. Or for people that are maybe too conservative and they're taking money out, it's just not keeping up. So you got to find that balance, in terms of your investment plan.
You mentioned when you're working, you're feeding those accounts.
Right.
The market downturns, the pullbacks, those create good buying opportunities. You're able to buy low. As you near retirement, it's losses become more important, especially if you're taking income out on top of that.
Right.
And it's very important to remember losses and gains are not created equal. If you're at a 10% loss, you need an 11% gain to get back to even. Roughly similar. As the losses get bigger, the gain needed to get back to even becomes larger. So if you're out there, you have a 20% loss, you need a 25% gain to get back to even.
Yeah, I want to talk about this. This is a nice little article here from Hartford Funds, where it kind of dives into if you had 100,000. So you just talked about, okay, we're down 20, you got to make 25, right? So let's say you're down 30%. Let's talk about that one.
Yeah, you need 43% to get back to even.
That's just that becomes a problem.
You go bigger than that, you lose 50, you got to double it. You have to have 100% return, double your money to get back to even.
Yeah.
And that's not including withdrawal. So down here they have an example. You'd taken a 4% withdrawal rate, and the different gain or the different loss scenarios here show how much cumulative gain during that window you need to make to get back to even.
That's a good point.
So you're taking 4% withdrawals, and within that 5-year window, you have a 10% loss, cumulative gain. You have to make 43% to get back to even. You have a 30% loss on top of those withdrawals. You're looking at a 100% gain, cumulative gain over that time period to get back to even. So it's not just the losses and gains without touching it. It's pairing how you're invested with your withdrawal rate.
That's exactly that concept. Yeah, exactly. Because again, so let's say that your account fell and then you took a withdrawal, you're just hurting yourself even more. But then there might be some viewers that are saying, "Oh, that's not me. I'm in a CD or a money market." Well, what are those paying? Are those going to keep up? And so you got to find that balance. And we're not telling people, hey, go be aggressive. That's not here at all, too. It's just finding a balance of, hey, maybe, what I would look at is breaking it up into different buckets where you have your short-term money, your midterm money, your long-term money in terms of what your money what your money does for you. Because again, Tommy, money, all it is a means to get us somewhere, right? It's a means to get us somewhere. And so by having that plan, it helps you and give you that comfort so you can afford to retire early.
Right, and that, the bucket approach is, do you have your savings account, the money you can access in terms of like a one-time need or a larger ticket item?
Right.
If you're going along and you're on your 4% withdrawal rate, you want to take that big trip, or the house needs a new roof, you got to have a car purchase. Is there money that you have set aside that's not going up and down with the market that you can access should the market be down? I mean, if your account's growing, it's going up, you take a little profit, but when the market's down, you take a big distribution. It takes that much more to get back to even.
I'm a big fan of having at least 2 years of savings, especially to help during those market downturns where people feel comfortable that, hey, I can still do the things I want to do. I want to talk about the next thing though, and that's also on taxes and taking things in proportion versus, do I pull from one account? Do I pull from multiple accounts? I mean, because again, taxes also plays a role here because we have our different tax buckets. So let's give some examples for our viewers on that as well.
Yeah, this individual has a $60,000 income need, has $25,000 in Social Security benefits, and then has assets he's going to access. So he has $200,000 in a taxable or a non-qualified account. Mm-hmm. He has $250,000 in his traditional pre-tax IRA 401k, and then he has $50,000 in a Roth. And he's looking at, do I take proportionally across those accounts to get from that $25,000 Social Security to $60,000 income need, or does he take one account in order? So starting with the taxable account, and then the traditional IRA, and then the Roth, and he's evaluating the tax impacts of that. And so in this example, you can see going sequentially, he takes the taxable account. He's in the no cap gains rate, so no taxes. You can see that bump in the middle when he's accessing the IRA, tax liability associated with that, and then back to no taxes with the Roth. Or he's looking at taking proportional withdrawals. So proportional to the asset size relative to the income need. You can see he pays a little bit of taxes in each year. But going across that 24 years that he's accessing those accounts, the sequential withdrawals he owes, up over $57,000 in taxes. In the proportional withdrawals, the estimated taxes owed are $35,000.
Look at that.
Yeah. Substantial tax savings, and it's not money taken out to pay taxes.
I mean, that's really good stuff there. So, we're talking about a lot right now. So this is also why we offer that 15-minute retirement review. So again, if you are considering looking at retiring early, give us a call. We can at least give you some insight because again, we help people retire. Or if you have questions on your 401k, Social Security, or just retirement in general. Tommy, we're here to help people with that.
They say situations maybe not repeat, but they rhyme. So,
right.
A lot of people are going through similar situations, and we've been there before, and we can answer those questions.
Absolutely. Well, wait, there's more. We still got more to talk about here, so make sure you stay with us. We're going to talk about health insurance. We're going to make sure we have a plan in place in terms of budgeting. If we want to retire early, more right after the break. Okay, this is it. So we're talking about, can you afford to retire early? We just talked about the money. This one really should be the first thing because again, I'm not moving an inch unless we have some form of health insurance. And a big question people have is how do I bridge that health insurance gap from wherever I'm going to retire to age 65?
We talked in segment B about taking a large distribution or having a big expense. Retiring without health insurance is can be an easy way to run into those unexpected expenses.
Right.
So there was a survey out here, the Retirement Confidence Survey from the Employee Benefit Research Institute, said 70% of Americans retire before they are eligible for Medicare.
There you go. So why are we having this conversation today? Why are we talking about this episode? I mean, people are doing it, right? I mean, but let's talk about some options when it comes to health insurance. I mean, the first one would be, okay, another employer-sponsored plan. So if you're married and your spouse is still working, that's one way to jump on where you're still covered.
Right. If there's been a plan to retire early or one spouse to retire early, that's kind of the easiest way to go is if one spouse is still working, jump on their plan.
Right. And the other thing too is number 2, you can jump on COBRA, right? But that only goes for 18 months. I mean, so sometimes what people would do is they would plan their retirement and say, okay, I'm going to retire, maybe 18 months prior to age 65. That's one way to bridge, right? I mean, it's an option. I'm not saying it's the best option, but it's an option.
Yeah, and if they're forced into retirement early or kind of the unexpected, it is an option that you have available to you to kind of at least bridge a gap for a while, let you figure other options out.
Yep. Another way is you take a look at a private plan. I mean, so you would take a look at the ACA and look at your options there. I mean, there are some things there. I mean, you got to find a plan that makes sense for you, but where you could potentially get a premium tax credit. Again, that I'm not going to get too deep into that, but it really comes down to your income that you're bringing in, which because again, that's a subsidy in terms of to help you with your insurance premiums.
Right, and generally the private plans can be expensive. The premium tax credit, if you're willing and able to really monitor your income or have a low income need, that can be an option to you. But it is income based, and higher income levels, it can get expensive pretty quick.
Right. I mean, and then there's HSAs out there as well too. But I think the big one, I mean, if don't just spring this on people. If you're looking at retiring early, I mean, plan ahead for future healthcare costs. Period. I mean, you're going to need healthcare. Because again, I already said this, I don't move an inch unless we have some form of coverage. Because again, even if for clients that have the financial means where they can retire, this is the one thing they're looking at. They are looking at, how do I bridge that gap before I get to Medicare? So again, Tom, it's just about having that plan when it comes to not just health insurance, but everything overall.
Yeah, retiring early, you're looking at, when you're eligible for Social Security, does it make sense to claim Social Security early? Do we need to defer? Do we have the assets to bridge to defer that? If there's a pension out there, again, are we claiming early? Are we waiting? That's all part of the plan. And looking at potentially 20, 25, 30 years in an early retirement situation, that's a lot of planning involved.
There's a lot of planning involved, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's also why it's so important to work with a team, in my opinion. I mean, I'm a big fan of that. I mean, that's what we do here. I mean, real quick, let's talk about that. I mean, this is something that we do. But I mean, a lot of times what happens is people work with different professionals that do different things for you because, again, we can't be everything to everybody. But we surround ourselves with professionals that are like-minded, that collaborate as one for the benefit of the client. So for example, what happens is people would go to a tax professional, CPA, EA, enrolled agent, whatever, helping you with your taxes. You maybe see them once a year, you pay your fee, and then you leave. Then you go to a whole nother office, and that's your financial advisor. They're helping you with your wealth management. They're helping you with your retirement plan, your financial plan, whatever your setup is in terms of how you pay for that. Then you leave, and then you go to an attorney to get a will, trust, power of attorney, right? And the whole nother office. But the question I have for our viewers is, are these professionals talking as one? Are they collaborating? And I tell you what, a lot of times what we see, the answer is no.
It's really getting that holistic plan together that you're committed to.
Right.
Earlier we talked about investing. Is your risk tolerance matched up with how you're invested? Are you going to make a bad decision, sell at the bottom, your account doesn't come back? Being committed to an investing plan.
Right.
We talk about an income plan. Is there
a tax plan?
A tax plan. Is there a realistic budget? Are we honest with ourselves about how much we want to spend, we're going to spend? putting all those pieces together, you have tax planning, estate planning for down the road. I mean, everything comes together when we're looking at, retiring and retiring early.
You said it at the very beginning, and this is the big takeaway from today. You do not hope to retire. You plan to retire, because when we're building these retirement plans, math doesn't lie. And I love that. So what a great episode. So again, folks, I hope you learned something today. I mean, so if you are considering retiring early, seek a professional. Talk to people that have done this before. That's why we're doing this show. Our goal is to help you, guide you, give you the tools that you need so you can make an informed decision during your own retirement journey. So again, thank you for watching. We'll catch you next time right here on Retire Vivid.
Cameron McCarty and Tommy Breitbach are investment advisor representatives of Vivid Wealth Management, a SEC-registered investment advisor located in Des Moines, Iowa. Investment advisory services are offered through Vivid Wealth Management, LLC. Insurance products and services are offered through Vivid Tax and Wealth Advisors, and individually licensed and appointed agents. Tax planning and preparation services are offered through Vivid Tax Center, LLC. The preceding entities are affiliated. Information presented is for educational purposes only and does not intend to make an offer or solicitation for the sale or purchase of any specific securities, investments, or investment strategies. Case studies and examples presented are hypothetical and used to demonstrate a concept. These studies do not represent actual clients or results. Similar or even positive results cannot be guaranteed. None of the entities above are affiliated or endorsed by the Social Security Administration or any government agency. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives, and is not intended to provide investment, tax, or legal advice. Listeners are encouraged to seek advice from a qualified tax, legal, or investment advisor to determine whether any information presented may be suitable for their specific situation. Past performance is not indicative of future performance. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed.